Welcome to lesson number 26 of the course Linguistics 2 English 504. Now, as you can see, conversation analysis written on the first screen, and you know that we've been dealing with conversation structures and the conversation styles and how to analyze these styles. In the last class we talked about the structures, different structures that are found in the conversation, and in this class we're going to talk about the analysis of conversation, how we analyze different conversation structures. Now, a glimpse of what we did last time. Conversation as a discourse type has been defined by Cook in the following way. It's not primarily necessitated by practical tasks. The number of participants is small. Turns are quite short. Talk is primarily for the participants and not for an outside audience. Now, conversation, you saw that last time we had a different styles of conversation, like the turn taking, how to take turns, how one speaker gives a chance to the other speaker to talk, and then the short dialogues, one person talking and the other person, or one person completing the discourse, or maybe two people talking. So how to analyze this conversation? Basically, it depends on the kind of the discourse, or the kind of structures, or the kind of conversation. Now, what is basically conversation? You can see a definition here given by Cook, that it's not primarily necessitated by practical task. You don't really talk really about the practical task. It is not because of practical tasks that a conversation is generated, but sometimes just for social gathering, sometimes just for socializing, sometimes just for facilitating people. You just generate talk, and just for no serious purpose behind, or no serious concern behind, you generate a talk. So it's not really necessarily generated because of a practical task. The number of participants is small, normally 2 or 3. It's not a very big crowd that is generating a conversation. So conversation is a small group talking, or maybe two people talking like a dialogue, or one person talking like a monologue. So participants are small and turns are quite short. Turns means when one person stops talking and the other person takes a turn, and the other person starts talking. So, and then when B stops talking, he sometimes gives a signal that this, he's finished his talk, he's finished the conversation, and he's finished his speech, and now it's the time for A to start the speech. So like this, the turns are not very long, the turns are very short, and it's sometimes very small speeches being uttered, and that is a conversation. You can say that two people are talking, or two people are exchanging their thoughts, or exchanging their views in very short sentences. Talk is primarily for the participants and not for an outside audience. Now, talk is not for the outside audience, is generally primarily for the participants, people who are taking part in participants. Now, how to basically analyze such talks, analyze such small speeches? Now, what is conversation analysis? This is what we're going to talk about today. Conversation analysis, the study of recorded, naturally occurring talk interaction. Talk in interaction. What is the recorded? It's recorded. It could be written, it could be oral, right? So that is a discourse. So when the written speech sometimes, or the written dialogues, they are very organized, they are spoken by people, they are very organized. Or it could sometimes be disorganized talk while speaking. There'll be more pauses, and sometimes they'll be disorganized, sometimes there won't be even a proper grammar. So it's a study of all that is coming in the shape of conversation. All that may be disorganized, may not have proper grammar, may be very short, maybe just a pause, or just sounds being uttered, or grunts being uttered. So it's basically conversation analysis. When you are looking at all those speeches, or all those kinds of words coming from people, CA, conversation analysis, marginally interested in language as such, but first and foremost in language as a practical social accomplishment. I want you to look at this word, practical social accomplishment. Social accomplishment, you accomplish something, you develop an interaction with somebody, you start talking with somebody, and you develop a kind of dialogue or a kind of relationship with that person, and that is basically your accomplishment, social accomplishment. It's a kind of achievement. You have basically developed a familiarity with somebody when you start talking to somebody. So first and the foremost in language, CA, conversation analysis, marginally interested in the first and the foremost thing, and that is practical social accomplishment. It's not really very interested in language, but when you analyze a speech, analyze a conversation, you are looking at the social interaction, or you're looking at how the two people or three people, they have developed a kind of relationship with each other. What is their social accomplishment, or what is their social relationship? Its object of study is the interactional organization of social activities. So object of study, what are you studying in conversation analysis? What are you looking at? What are you focusing on? It's the object of study is the interactional organization of social activities. Interactional organization, interactional, when you are in the social activities, when you are conducting, when you are talking with each other, or when you are socializing with each other, whatever activities you perform, it's basically the study of that. It's the interactional organization, how you organize, how the speech is organized, how during interaction when two people are talking, how the speech is organized. CA aims at discovering how participants understand and respond to one another in their turns at talk, with a central focus on how sequences of actions are generated. CA aims at discovering how participants understand and respond to one another. So in conversation analysis, you're basically looking at the interaction factor or the comprehension factor, and also the response factor, how people talk to one another and how they give response to each other. So in their turns of talk, when it's their turn to speak, what they say and how they take their turn and how they give turn to the other, with a central focus on how sequences of actions are generated. With every speech, there is a sequence generated. With every speech, from question, there may be an answer generated. And from answer again, sometimes there's another question generated. So it's sometimes in a series of questions and answers, or you have the series of like greetings, or series of invitation and acceptance. In these pairs, adjacency pairs, if you remember, we talked about in the last class adjacency pairs, in which the two sentences coming in sequence, in adjacent to each other. In these pairs, you are basically looking at how they are generated and what should be the speech of B if A said something. So CA aims at discovering how participants understand and respond to one another in their turns at talk, with a central focus on how sequences of actions are generated. Throughout the course of conversation or talking interaction, speakers display in the next turns an understanding of what the prior turn was about on the assumption of the analyst. Now, what happens when two people are talking? Of course, they are also assuming and they are expecting some response from each other. So when they talk, they display, they have to show, they have to indicate that they know what was there in the last speech, what the prior turn was about. If it wasn't so, then the conversation would be meaningless. Like if the question is about A and the answer is about B, so that would be a meaningless. It won't be a proper response, it won't be a proper sequence, the flow would be disturbed. So the speaker, when they take turns, the speakers, when they take turn of speaking, when they speak, they do display that that quality, that they know what happened in the last turn, or what was the last turn about, what was the question about, so they display while giving the answer. So questions and answers, they must match each other for the flow of the conversation to continue. Basic notions. Let's look at some basic notions of conversation analysis. The first one and the most important one is turn taking, a very common phenomena in the conversation, because if you don't take turns, proper turn at a proper time, then the flow of conversation will be disturbed. So the starting point is the observation that conversation involves turn taking, and at the end of one speaker's turn and the beginning of the next latch on each other with almost perfect precision. Overlap of turns, when two or more participants talk at the same time, occurs in about 5% of the cases, and this suggests the speakers know how, when and where to enter. The signal that one turn has come to an end and another should begin. So if there is an overlapping, then there is no flow. There should not be an overlapping. The speakers should give a signal that it's time for the other speaker to start talking. The speakers should indicate that they have finished talking, they have finished their speech, and that is where the other person enters into conversation. But if it's like overlapping, then the other person is entering at the wrong time. So overlapping sometimes occurs in case of about like 5% of the cases and analysis, and this suggests the speakers know how, when and where to enter. So overlapping is just like 5% of the cases. In most cases, in 95% cases, people know for the smooth flow of conversation, people know when to enter, and there hardly is an overlapping or interruption. Now, turn taking again. Conversation is analyzed in turns, one speaker and then the next. So when you are analyzing the turn taking, when you are looking at the turn taking, whether the turn taking is going on at the right time, then what you do, you see you analyze the first speaker's speech first. You look at the one speaker's speech first, and then you look at the next speaker. So it's like analyzing both the speeches or both the utterances separately. You can't really mix them up. So you will come to know whether the turn was at the right time or whether the speaker entered the conversation at the right time. A turn consists of one or more turn constructional units. Now TCU, that is turn constructional units, the units which construct turn or which generate turn or which tell us that it's somebody's turn to speak. The end of a turn constructional unit is a point during a turn where another speaker can intervene. So this is TCU. The end of TCU means that the other speaker has to enter now. So a turn construction unit at the end would mean that one speech is finished and the other speaker is entering. This point is called a turn transitional relevant point. Look at the word transitional. Transition means change, shift. It's called turn shifting, turn transitional relevant point. That now it is a relevant time, it is the right time for the other speaker to enter. Now is the right time for transition to occur. What is transition? Change of speech, change of a speaker, shifting to another speaker. So turn transitional relevant point, what is that point? The end of turn, the end of TCU, the end of turn construction unit. Turn construction unit starts where somebody is about to finish, and when he finishes, that is the time, that is the end of turn construction unit, TCU. There you have a point where the other speaker has to enter, and that is called turn transitional relevant point. Relevant, look at the word relevant. The word of focus here is transition, and another word of focus is relevant. Transition, shifting, relevant, shifting. Change of the speaker, change of the speaker and the change of the speech at the right time. Let's look at an example here. Look at an example here. So Phoebe tells me you to play piano. Yeah, you know, I used to play keyboards in college. Why? Do you have one here? No. Okay. Now each of these speeches is a turn. because the other speaker is entering. First R is speaking, then M, then R, then M, then R, then M. So it's a series of speeches, right? So it's when R says, so Fib tells me you are playing piano, or you have to play piano. So it's a question, and now it's the other person's, for M, for example, Muhammad's turn to speak. So he says yeah, and then yeah, and then again it's a turn of R to speak. So each of these speeches is a turn basically. There are 6 TCUs and 6 turns here. You can see 6 TCUs, turn constructional units. There are 6 different turn constructional units, and there are 6 turns. 6 times a turn has occurred. 6 times a speaker has been changed. The other speaker intervenes regularly at each turn construction, TRP, at the end of turn transitional relevant point. At every turn transitional relevant point, the other speaker has intervened and the other speaker has entered the conversation. So whenever it's the TTRP, turn transitional relevant point, the other speaker enters and talks. Now, how turn taking works? There are 3 possibilities how turn taking works. The current speaker selects the next speaker. The first option is that the current speaker himself selects the other speaker and gives a chance to the other speaker to reply. So the first option is that the current speaker himself finishes his speech or her speech and allows the other speaker to start talking and allows the other speaker to reply. Or if this does not operate, the next speaker self-selects. Second option, the next speaker gives intervenes himself. The second speaker selects the right time or selects the TTRP himself and starts talking. So that could not be interruption sometimes, and even sometimes it could also be interruption. So in any case, that is a second possibility, that the listener or the other speaker, the speaker B, selects the time himself, because if feels that speaker A is not giving a chance to him to speak, or the speaker E is not letting him speak, so then it's the speaker B who has to select the time to speak. So he selects the time himself, TTRP, the turn transition relevant point, and from there intervenes and starts talking. The third possibility, if this does not operate, the current speaker may continue. Then the third option is that the current speaker may continue talking, because if he gives a chance and then there is no speech from the other side, the third possibility is that the current speaker would continue talking, would maybe relevant to his last speech, or maybe irrelevant, or maybe would just like to continue, just like to add to the information already given in the first speech. So that is the third possibility, that in the third possibility it's the current speaker who again starts talking, and he may continue without without giving chance to the other, or he may sometimes give a chance to the other, but when there is silence on the other end, then maybe the speaker B doesn't want to intervene, so then the current speaker would continue talking. The components of turn taking, turn constructional units, let's look at it again. Turn constructional units, TCUs. Turns at talk can be seen as constructed out of units, which broadly correspond to linguistic categories such as sentences, clauses, single words like a, what, or phrases. Now, these are turn constructional units where they indicate that the other person has to start talking. They indicate that one person has finished and the other person has to talk now. So turn at talk can be seen as constructed out of units, which broadly correspond to what linguistic categories, such as sentences. They could be such sentences which indicate that it's a turn construction unit. There could be some words, single words, or even phrases that are the turn construction units, that they now give an indication for the other speaker to start talking. So they are the TCUs, could be in any shape. They could be the words, they could be phrases, they could be sentences. Broadly speaking, they correspond. The turns at talk can be seen as constructed. They are constructed out of the units. And what are these units? They correspond to the linguistic categories. The units could be sentences, could be phrases, words. From there, the turn constructional units are constructed, and it's basically a chance, an indication of maybe the other speaker to intervene and start talking to form up the dialogue. Features of turn construction units like projectability. There are two features of TCUs. Projectability. It is possible for participants to project in the course of turn construction unit what sort of unit it is and at what point it is likely to end. So projectability, there is a projection possible for the participants to project what during TCU's course of turn construction unit, that what type of unit it is and at what point it is likely finished. So they would just it is possible for the people to utter such sentences which give an indication that this sentence would finish at this point. For example, they would utter simple sentences, or they would utter a question. So they do give an indication that yes, this is a question and this question would finish at this point. So inside the sentences there would be words, or there would be maybe a change of tone, that when the tone drops at the end or the volume drops at the end of sentence, it's a kind of indication that it's about to finish. So even the TCUs, they do indicate. Hearing the TCUs from people, they can indicate, people can indicate what kind of TCU it is, what kind of sentence it is, or where it is likely to finish, or where would be the turn transitional relevant point, where the last point would be there, where the other speaker has to intervene. Transition relevance place. At the end of each unit, there is a possibility for legitimate transition between speakers. So at the end of each unit, you have that turn transition relevance point where there is a chance of legitimate transition between speakers. Normally expected, the turn is expected at the end of the sentence. Turn is expected. It may be or it may not be sometimes, but it's expected that there would be a legitimate or the turn which would be legal, or the turn which would be justified. So there is a chance that at the end of each unit there would be a justified transition between speaker, a justified change of speech, or the second speaker might intervene. The second speaker has that place or has that moment to enter the conversation. So transition relevance place, the two features again, for projectability, where the speaker gives an indication that this is the point where my speech might finish, or what kind of speech it is. The speaker does give an indication that this is the kind of speech and it is likely to finish at this point, and then the other speaker can start talking. The second instance is that normally speaking, at the end of each speech, at the end of each turn, there is a chance for the other speaker to intervene and start talking. Turn distribution. Who dominates the conversation in terms of number of turns taken or length of turns? There is no exclusion of parties, and the number of parties can change. What is turn distribution? How do you distribute the turn? Who dominates the conversation? It means who dominates the conversation in terms of number of turns taken. How many times a speaker has spoken? How many turns has a speaker taken? And what were the lengths? So there is no exclusion of parties here, no parties excluded here, no speaker is excluded here. All of them are included, or both of them are included, and how many times has each of them has spoken, and nobody is basically out of that conversation. Nobody is quiet here. Both the parties are talking to each other, both the parties are discussing with each other, and you see that how many times has each spoken, and the one who dominates the conversation is thought to be the one who is taking part in the discussion or conversation the most. The number of parties can change. The number of people, of course, can change. Again, from 2 you can have 3, that can change, and we see sometimes 2 people talking and the third one also intervenes, and we see that sometimes the third one dominates or the second one dominates. So in turn distribution, you have 2 parties or 3 parties or more, they can change, the number of parties can change, and it is determined who has dominated the conversation by looking at the number of turns taken by each speaker. Now there is also no number, the length is not determined. There is no rule about the length of the turns, that how long a turn is or how short a turn is. So they just look at the number of turns speaker has taken, and the one who takes more turns is thought to be the one who dominates the conversation. Then let's look at some of the rules of turn taking. If current speaker selects next speaker in current turn, then current must stop speaking and the next must speak next. Now here if one speaker A gives a chance to speaker B and selects a turn for him to speak, then he must stop talking, because if he continues talking, then it would be a kind of interruption, it would be a kind of overlapping sometimes. So the rule is that if I give chance to my friend to talk, then I have to be quiet. If I am myself giving him chance, that is the first option we have, the first choice we studied, that in the first option you have a speaker, first speaker giving a chance to the second speaker, selecting the time himself, selecting that moment himself or herself where he or she wants the next speaker to start talking. So if I'm giving chance to somebody myself, then I must stop talking. This is the first rule. Second one, if current does not select next, then any other party selects and the other party selects first speaker, gaining rights to the next turn. So the second rule is that if the current doesn't give chance, then the next speaker has to take turn and the next speaker has to select himself or herself. So that is the second option, where I'm not giving chance to my friend, but my friend intervenes himself or my friend himself takes a turn and starts talking. Now after that, again I have the right to reply. So my right to talk would be after he has finished. My right to talk would be, my turn to talk would be after my friend has finished. So this is how, since he has taken a turn to speak, then I must be quiet and I must wait for him to finish and then I start talking. So if current has not selected next and no other party self-selects, then current may but need not continue. So then the third option, that when if I have not selected, he has not selected, then I may continue. It's a modal verb, may. It's not necessary. It's not, if I don't want to talk, if I don't want to continue, I can stop. That's my choice, and it's not a rule for me to continue talking. So in conversation, you do have 3 options, you have 3 rules. The first rule, if A gives a chance to B to speak, then A must be quiet. If A doesn't give a chance, then B must select the right time to speak. C, if nobody gives a chance to each other and A is talking and A doesn't give chance to B and B doesn't take a chance, then A might continue talking for the, he may continue giving information or may like to add up information to the speech he already uttered. So these are the 3 options or 3 different occasions for conversations, turn taking. Adjacency pairs, we talked a little about in the last class. One of the most noticeable thing about conversation is that certain classes of utterances conventionally come in pairs. Convention, look at the word convention. Conventionally, sometimes some of the things or some of the conversations, they always come in pairs. If it's if something is said, then in reply something else must be said. If you question, then the question must follow with an answer. If there is no answer, it's not an ideal situation. It's not the desired response. So desired response would be that if I ask a question, then I must get an answer. So question and answer, they are always in pairs, called adjacency pairs. Another form of adjacency pairs are greeting. You greet somebody and the other person greets you back. So you say assalamu alaikum, wa alaikum assalam, right? Or hello, hi. So these are adjacency pairs of greetings where somebody A greets B, then B replies back. Again, this is in pair. Invitation acceptance or declination. So if I invite somebody, let's have tea, let's go to cafeteria and take tea, the other person either accepts or declines. Either he would say, all right, thank you very much, let's go, or he declines and maybe he's busy, he says, sorry, thank you very much, I can't go right now, I'm busy. So in any case, the invitation is followed by the response. You invite somebody, then the response is definitely there. It could be either positive or negative. It could be, yes, thank you very much, I would certainly come. You say, please join us at our party, or we have a wedding party, please join us. Then there must be a reply, okay, yes, we'll gladly come and join you. Or maybe you regret sometimes, you're busy and you're already committed somewhere. You say, sorry, it would be difficult for me because I already have a commitment. So in any case, whether positive or negative, this occurs in the form of pair. Offer acceptance. Again, you offer something to somebody, the other person might accept or might not accept sometimes. So it could be refusal even, like you offer something, would you like to have tea? And somebody might say, oh sure, why not? Thank you very much. Or refusal, no, I've just had, thank you very much. No, I don't take tea. So it could be either acceptance or refusal. In any case, they occur in pairs. Such adjacency pairs, such types of conversations, they always occur in pairs, and they are called adjacency pairs. Noticeable absence. Sometimes during conversation you find somebody quiet. You ask something and you find somebody quiet, and it is really noticeable that yes, the response was expected and there is no response, and this can be noted. Like see, the absence of a second pair part is most often treated participants as a noticeable absence, an absence which can be noticed, and the speaker of the first part may infer a reason for the absence. Speaker of the first part would then infer the reason, that this could be the reason. Maybe somebody has not heard me properly, or maybe somebody is angry, maybe somebody is not interested in what I'm saying, or somebody doesn't want to reply, is not in a mood to reply. So in any case, the first part would infer and then would may continue with the conversation by maybe repeating the question. You see a very interesting example here. Have to cut this, mummy? Won't we, mummy? Won't we? Mother, yes. Now here mother is very busy. She is not really interested in replying to the child immediately. She is very busy. She doesn't have time. She may be thinking about cutting something and getting on with her work. So she doesn't reply. One utterance, child, have to cut this, mummy. Second utterance, won't we, mummy? No reply. Third utterance, won't we, mummy? Well, now she says yes, a very brief yes, because she is not in a mood maybe, or she doesn't have time to reply to the question immediately, because maybe the child would keep on talking then, or maybe ask more questions. So here the absence has been noted. It is noticeable absence. It is not only once, but it is twice. 2 times the child asked question and the mother didn't reply. The third time the child insists, because he has really noticed that absence, he's noticed that quietness, he's noticed that no reply, and maybe the child really is inquisitive and he wants to know, and he wants his mother to talk. So that is why he's repeating the same thing. Won't we, mummy? Won't we? sometimes even in our everyday life, we sometimes we are not really very interested, and we are sometimes very busy, and the children come and keep on asking questions from us. And sometimes when they repeat the same question, then finally maybe after 2 or 3 times again we reply to them, but very brief reply. Yes, okay, go. These are very brief replies, because here the absence is noticeable, because it's not only once or twice, it's 2 or 3 or 4 times, and then the conversation doesn't continue. But maybe the child wants to continue with the conversation, wants the answers, because children usually they do want the answer to their questions. You can't really avoid them. So children, they keep on repeating their questions, and finally when they get answers, they are satisfied. So this is a case of noticeable absence, the absence which can be noted. Preference organization of adjacency pair. How do you organize the pairs? Preferred. An inferential aspect of the adjacency pairs stems from the fact that certain first pair paths make alternative actions relevant in second position. In some adjacency pairs, there is a choice of 2 likely responses, of which one is termed as preferred response and the other one is termed as dispreferred response. Preferred response occurs more frequently. It's preferred. Usually a question is followed by the answer. That is a preferred response. Where did you go? I went to cafeteria. Preferred. Dispreferred, why are you asking this? Where did you go? Where were you? So a question followed by a question. So here that is a dispreferred, because it's less common, so it's dispreferred. So preference is for the positive answers, an answer which is relevant. No preference for such answers which may change the theme, or which may sound sometimes very blunt or rude. So there are 2 types of responses. Preferred organization of adjacency pairs we were talking about. In some adjacency pairs there is a choice of 2 likely responses. One is the preferred response and the other is the dispreferred response. Repairing. How do you repair your conversation? How do you change your sentence? You may sometimes utter a sentence and you feel that you uttered it wrongly. So sometimes the sentence has to be repaired. It could be repaired by the speaker himself, or it could be even sometimes repaired by the hearer. Repair is a generic term used in conversation analysis to cover a wide range of phenomena, from seeming errors in turn-taking such as overlapping talk. Sometimes there is an overlapping. A person is speaking and the other person also repeats some of the words of the speaker. So in that case, sometimes a confusion occurs. So then it's a repair work done, and you utter the sentences again separately. Then you understand what's the meaning of those sentences. So that is a repair work. It covers a wide range of phenomena, from seeming errors in turn-taking such as overlapping talk. Overlapping talk means there are some words overlapping between 2 speeches. To any of the forms to what is commonly called corrections. That is substantive faults in the contents of what someone has said. It could just be correction of overlapping, or it could be correction of faults or the wrong, absolutely wrong sentence, like somebody pronouncing the name wrongly, or maybe sometimes somebody has forgotten the name and is basically speaking out another name for somebody. So that is a kind of correction. So the range of repairs is quite broad. It could be just maybe slip of tongue sometimes, or maybe the overlapping, and it could also be on the extreme end, it could also be the correction of wrong sentences or correction of wrong utterances. The organization. How do you organize the repairs? How to give the repairs? First, look at the types of repairs. The repair system embodies a distinction between, number 1, the initiation of the repair, marking something as source of trouble. First of all, you have to note down, you have to mark what was wrong with the speech. Where did the speaker go wrong? So you are marking something as a source of trouble. That could be trouble, that could create confusion, that could create disturbance in the mind of the listener. And the actual repair itself, and then of course you apply the actual sentence, you apply the correct sentence, you repair that damage which was a result of the wrong utterance. The actual pair itself, there is also a distinction between repair initiated by self, who produce a trouble source, and the repair initiated by the other. So consequently, we see that there are 4 different varieties of repair. Now, let's look at the first one, self-initiated self-repair. Repair is both initiated and carried out by the speaker of the trouble source. So if I said something wrong, I have to correct it. That is the first case. Repair is both initiated and carried out by the speaker. I said something wrong, I would excuse maybe, and I would change. I would correct my speech. Is it flu you've got? No, I don't think. No, this is basically a mistake. It could cause a trouble. That N says, I don't think I have flu. Well, how can somebody be unaware of his problem? If I have a flu, I know I have flu. I can't say I don't know if I have a flu or not. So I don't think, basically here he means I refuse to have all these things. I refuse to have all these things. Like he doesn't want, he doesn't get flus, so he doesn't want to accept that he's got flu, and that is how he's saying, I refuse to have all those things. This means I don't like flu, I don't like having flu, so I don't think I have flu, because I don't like to have flu. I don't think that it should occur to me, and I should feel the problem of flu. So that is self-initiated correction, self-initiated repair. He says, I don't think, and then he corrects it. He says, I refuse to have all these things. I don't think doesn't mean that I don't know if I have flu or not. Here, this may give an impression. The first part may give an impression that I don't know if I have a flu or not. Whereas that is not practically, that is not possible. So I would just correct it again, and I would say I refuse to have all these things. Moving on to the next slide, we see other initiated self-repair. This means the listener is now initiating the repair. The listener is correcting me, for example. Repair is carried out by the speaker of the trouble source, initiated by the recipient. He corrects it himself, but it is initiated by the person who was listening to it, by the other party, by the speaker B. A would correct it, would do the self-repair, would do the repair, but basically B would initiate it. Repair is carried out by the speaker of the trouble source, but who initiates it? Initiated by the recipient. For example, Ken, is Al here today? Don, yeah. Roger, he is. A, Don, well, he is. So the other, initiated by Roger here, initiated by Roger, he is, no, maybe Roger is surprised and is not really very sure or doesn't believe that Al is here. So he says that maybe Dan is wrong, or Dan is not giving the facts. So he initiates it, and then Dan corrects, well, he is. The first speech, yeah, maybe Roger thinks is not the fact. So Roger initiates the correction, and Dan himself makes the repair, says, well, he is. Roger's turn 4 is an example of what is called the next turn repair initiator. NTRI, next turn repair initiator. Other NTRIs may be words like what, or even non-verbal gestures such as a quizzical look. Sometimes looking at a person as if you are inquiring something, you don't believe, and you want somebody to give you the answer just through your look, just looking at your face. You give such a look as if you want to ask something. It's a quizzical look. So just through quizzical look even the repair is initiated, or some words like what, or really, show, don't tell me. These some of the indicators of self repairs. So initiated by speaker B or speaker C, but repaired by the same speaker who uttered, or he is the one who uttered the troublemaker. self-initiated other repair. The speaker of a trouble source may try and get the recipient to repair the trouble. For example, if a name is proving troublesome to remember. Now I can, for example, remember name of somebody and maybe I utter it wrongly because I want somebody to correct me. I want my listener to correct me. I want my listener to give the repair. In the following example, the first speaker's reference to his trouble remembering somebody's or someone's name initiates the second speaker's repair. I want the other speaker to initiate a repair, to give the repair. For example, he had his Mr. whatever, I can't think of his first name, Watts, on the one that wrote that piece. And what does A say? Look at Dan Watts. He gives the right name. So B is basically tempting A to give the right name. B is tempting A to make the correction, make the repair. He can't remember the name and he wants the other person to remind him, or the other person to repair, make the repair of what he's saying. He said, what's on the one, and he's not really very sure what was the first name or whether even Watts is right or wrong. So immediately A intervenes and gives the right name, Dan Watts. Other initiated other repair. The recipient of a trouble source turn both initiates and carries out the repair. This is closest to what is conventionally understood by correction. Recipient of the trouble source turn both initiates and carries out. So if I hear somebody say something wrong, I would initiate a repair and also correct it. I would indicate that yes, here he is wrong, and I would also make a correction of that. For example, in the following example, there is an explicit correction which is then acknowledged and accepted in the subsequent term. For example, Millie, and then they said something about Khrushchev has leukemia, so I thought, oh, it's all a big put on. Jean says Brezhnev, not Khrushchev, but Brezhnev. So initiating the repair and doing the repair. So Jean makes the repair, initiates the repair, makes the repair himself or herself. Jean Brezhnev, not Khrushchev. Millie said, use the word Khrushchev. She was wrong, but immediately Jean intervened and immediately initiated the repair and also gave the repair. Right? So this is both initiating and carrying out the repair. Another term, interruptions. What are interruptions? Very bad, of course. Jennifer quotes, they spoil. Jennifer quotes says, violation of turn-taking rules of conversation. When you are interrupting, you are basically violating the rules of conversation. What are the rules of conversation? That if you remember, we studied just today, the rules, especially the rule number 1 applies really well here, that if I have to give chance to somebody to speak, then I have to be quiet. I have to stop talking if I want somebody else to start talking. So violation of this would be interruption. If I'm not a good listener, for example, some people they immediately interrupt and they stop somebody from talking or from carrying out the speech. So that is called interruption. You interrupt in between. Somebody talking and you interrupt in between. That is the interruption. Violation. And why are you doing? When you do that, you're basically violating the rules of turn taking or the rules of conversation. Conversation says, a smooth conversation is when one is quiet, the other is talking. And when this in turn taking, one is giving a turn to other and the other is taking a turn, and one is silent then. So violation of turn taking rules of conversation, the next speaker begins to speak while the current speaker is still speaking. This is interruption at a point in the current speaker's turn which could not be defined as a last word. Now only after the last word the other speaker should start talking. So when he starts talking and the last word is the speaker has not reached the last word, or I'm still talking, I haven't reached my last word and my friend starts talking, that would be interruption. He or she would be interrupting me. Interruptions break the symmetry of conversational model. Look at this word symmetry. It's not symmetrical conversation. It's not a fluent conversation. The conversation is not in flow. The interruption prevents the first speaker from finishing his or her turn and at the same time gaining turn for himself. So he interrupts, he prevents the first speaker from finishing his turn. He stops the first speaker from finishing the turn and at the same time gaining a turn for oneself, second speaker. The second speaker forcibly takes his turn or her turn, forcibly takes his turn or her turn, because the first speaker is still talking. So this is not a fluent conversation, the flow is disturbed. Violation of turn-taking model, grabbing the floor, you suddenly grabbing the floor to talk, hogging the floor, taking the floor although the other speaker was selected. This is also a violation. Like if I for example in a meeting the chairperson gives chance to Ahmed to speak and tells Ahmed to speak and it's Ali intervening and Ali starts talking, that is interruption. That is called hogging the floor. Hogging the floor means that I give chance to A to speak and B starts talking. So B has really taken the opportunity of talking and he has basically snatched the right of A. He has really interrupted in between, and that is called basically hogging the floor. Not responding, silence. Again, this is a violation of turn-taking model, that if somebody is silent, I start the conversation, I ask a question from somebody and in reply the other person is quiet, doesn't talk or is silent. Again, that would be violation of turn-taking model, because turn-taking model means A finishes, B starts talking, B finishes, A starts talking. That is the ideal situation. But when A talks, A says something and B is silent. So again A starts asks something, B is silent. So on the other side, no response again would be a violation of turn-taking model. Definition of overlap. Another term, overlap, when some of the words are common. Overlap is when two voices are going on at the same time, two people talking at the same time, overlapping. Some of the sentences common. Quotes says instances of slight over anticipation by the next speaker. Over anticipation, like I'm talking and my friend also starts talking. He overestimates or over what I'm going to say, or he over anticipates, like premature anticipation that I haven't finished yet, and he thinks that this is what I'm going to say or this is what my speech would be, and he starts talking or she starts talking immediately. So that would be overlapping when two voices are heard at the same time. It's basically a case of over anticipation. If I'm over anticipating that this person would say something next, what he's going to say, this is basically I'm over anticipating and I start talking, so that would be overlapping. Over anticipation does not necessarily force the first speaker to finish or her turn. So here, if somebody interrupts and starts talking, it's not really a signal, or it's not necessary that I stop talking. I may continue talking, and that would result in overlapping, because somebody over anticipates or thinks he knows what I'm going to say and starts talking. So it's not really necessary for me to be quiet, because I don't know what he has anticipated. I'm not sure. I would like to finish my point. So I would like to finish until the end, and sometimes I would say, please let me finish. Now this is a very common term used, let me finish. This means that the other person is over anticipating, or he is trying to be smart and he knows what I'm going to say and he starts talking. Then it would be a case when two voices are heard at the same time, and that is called overlapping of speech. Now, difference between interruption and overlap, interruption versus overlap. high involvement style in one and high considerateness style. So high involvement is interruption, when there's a lot of involvement, and high considerateness style is when there is a turn taking and there is overlapping. You are considerate, that sometimes you want to help the other person and you would start talking sometimes by supporting that person. You start supporting that person, but the other person doesn't finish, and there is two voices heard at the same time. High involvement style is like little or no pause, supportive tags like yes, okay, overlapping questions like fast-paced latching, elaborating on the topic, speaking too much, explaining it too much. Conversation is not disrupted and shows interest and rapport. In sometimes the high involvement style conversation is not disrupted. Sometimes somebody who's really very active in discussion. We are here talking about people who are highly involved in conversation, and they give sometimes little pauses to show that they are really involved in talk and they are interested in what is going on. And sometimes they would explain, while talking they would explain the topic in detail, they would elaborate the topic, and here the conversation is not disrupted. It's a very fluent conversation, no disruptions in between, and it's going on, it goes in a flow. And here this shows that the speaker really shows interest and he's a good rapport. He understands what he's saying, he means what he's saying, and this is like an indication of his high involvement in the conversation. High considerateness style means favor long pauses, averse to overlaps, await for TRP, and no sudden topic shifts. This is high considerateness style. When you are highly considerate about the speaker, you favor long pauses because you are silent and you want to listen it properly. If there are long pauses here, you are considerate, you want the other person to finish it properly. Averse to overlaps, chances of overlap sometimes, and await TRP, transition relevant point. You wait for the other person to finish. You wait for that point where the other person would finish and you would start talking. No sudden topic shifts. Suddenly the topic is not changed, but you finish the topic first, and you finish one thing first and then you change the topic. So you are very your topics are very, you're discussing on the topics very uniformly. There is a uniformity or a unity in discussion or in your speech. You would like to finish one topic first and then you start the next topic. So that is no sudden topic shifts. If you change it, you first finish the first topic and then you move to the second topic. It's not like you're mixing up 2 or 3 topics together, you suddenly change the topic. So people who do that, sometimes they're thought to be not prepared sometimes to talk, or sometimes they have too many things or preoccupied with so many things that they would mix up so many themes together, and sometimes it becomes difficult for the listeners to understand. Concluding today's discussion on the conversation analysis, we have different conversation styles. We have subculture, culture, individual style, predisposition. These are the different conversation styles. They are related with cultures, and the culture also has effect on the kind of conversation. Individual style, everybody has an individual style of talking, has an individual style of conversation. And predisposition also, that somebody is preoccupied and already he has already thought how to start the conversation, how to give chance to the others and what to say. Situation, it depends also on situations. The situation of turn taking we studied, adjacency pairs we studied. So what is the right situation for you to talk, or what is the right point where you should intervene and start talking. Hierarchy, relationship of the speakers, that sometimes when the senior is speaking, the junior would remain silent and would let the senior finish. Relationship, this depends on the relationship of the speakers, how senior is one and how junior is the other. normally in the offices also, and also in the families, you have sometimes we say that it's really rude, considered rude to speak in front of elders or to interrupt the elders. So let the elders finish first and then you start talking. So this is a case again of the relationship between the speakers. So all these things, they do have an effect on the conversation analysis. When you are analyzing the text, when you are analyzing conversation, you see things like situations, you see things like the knowledge of the speaker, you see things like relationship between the speakers, you also see the hierarchy, you see what is the context of speaking, what is the right time for turn taking, what is the right time for remaining quiet, and how certain questions are replied to. So a case of and how, when to remain silent. Sometimes your silence can be noticed. It is noticeable silence, as we saw, noticeable quietness. So when you quiet, sometimes it doesn't really have a flow in conversation. The conversation stops. So in today's lesson, we talked about the analysis of conversation. In last lesson, we talked about how is the structure of conversation, how conversation is structured in different ways, and what are the different ways to give chance to the others to talk. In today's lesson, we talked about, in last lesson we talked about structures, and in today's lesson we talked about how the structures are analyzed. So until the next lecture, when we'll be talking about change in language, how what are the different changes or variations in language from different aspects, we would like to finish here today's discussion, which was on the analysis of conversation structure. Goodbye.